Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Johnson, and I'm one of four co-founders of Wanawari. If you are not familiar with Wanawari, Wanawari is a Black Arts Center located in the historic Central District in Seattle. We use arts and culture as a way to fight the displacement and gentrification of Black people from our historic neighborhoods. One of our goals is to bring in artists from all over the world to have a diasporic conversation around what it means to be Black right now. And we're super excited to have our current artist, Adele Todd, today here with us. Hi, Adele.
Hello.
So I'm going to read a little bit about Adele, and then we're going to get into talking to her more about her work. You all have been wowed by her embroidery. So we'll get to actually talk about her process and things like that. Adele Todd is from Trinidad or she's a Trinidad and Tobago based artist who works in embroidery and performance using soft materials to discuss hard topics, which is the heart of her practice. Themes relating to, but not exclusive to islands such as domestic violence, crime, and misandry. She has shown her work locally, regionally, and internationally, including CCA, Glasgow, Florence Biennial, Beijing Biennial. She has also been a recipient of the Catapult Grant Jamaica and CPR Curatorial Program for Research in New York in 2019. Please join me in welcoming Adele Todd.
Ah,
I'm going to get our thing ready. 1 second.
oh, interesting place to start.
No, no, no. We're not starting that.
Oh, okay.
Bear with me.
Okay.
Hmm. Great. It's all you. And I will go to our first slide.
Okay. Ah, well, as you realize, I thought I would start with the current work. And this piece, I generally do a lot of embroidery based on um, police, people in power, how people in power use that power. And in this instance, you see two boys playing with bubbles, and I just could not resist having the officer walk through them. And as you can tell, the reason for it is the whole idea of how fragile all their lives happen to be. The police officer is there to walk the perimeter, he's there to encourage peace and order, and the boys are just being boys, but they are playing with a sort of a gun. It is a bubble wand or bubble gun, and it brings up a lot of thoughts about safety and about protection. And it was quite a pleasure doing this piece of work. I had been working on this body of work called Popo for a very, very long time. It felt like forever. And the opportunity to work very large was very exciting for me because the last time, and when I say very large, for me, very large is above 2 feet. This is not 2 feet though, but working larger than I get to work when I'm in Trinidad is always a pleasure. And so for this work that is seen at your gallery, working larger and being able to work like that was a privilege. So the second piece is my performance. I work in performance as well. And this is a Juve character. Juve is a Carnival Monday Sunday into Monday event that happens in Trinidad and Tobago. But of course, Trinidad and Tobago has exported Carnival to a large portion of the world, mainly the diaspora. So I think a lot of people know what Juve is. And normally, the character that you play, the traditional character, is always a woman holding a baby. But I decided to completely subvert that and focus on the baby, and it was quite controversial and unusual because it's always about the woman holding the baby, walking around telling people, particularly men, that wants them to maintain her because any of them can be the father, which is the usual way that the character is portrayed. I chose the baby. I think that the baby is the most important character. So I did that this year, 2022.
Great.
Oh, this piece was done for a show on Lord Kitchener, and you may or may not know that Lord Kitchener is one of our largest exports in terms of calypso music.
Oh,
Pre-Windrush, I think he was in London in the early 40s, and he was feted and lauded and quite beloved by the British. He was one of the success stories of Caribbean people going to London. And he had a song called Cockroach and Petticoat. That song is from, I think, the 1980s. And it's all about a cockroach literally running up this woman's clothing. And I wanted to do something very tongue in cheek. And I decided that let it be Kitchener himself. So Kitchener Kitchener is actually the cockroach, and he's wearing a cravat, and he has a cockroach kind of sneaking up his the front of his cravat, and of course the lady is in all crinoline. And again, this was a larger work. This was about nearly 2 feet, and it,
wow.
it was it was just wonderful to do. I hadn't had the opportunity to work on something not simple per se, but something that was much more lighthearted than the things I normally do.
Yeah. Um,
This body of work is something I'm continuing to explore. I have wanted to do ceramic pieces, but I loathe to do so because I give 100% to everything I do. And if I have to do ceramics, I will need to stay in a studio over a period of time and work only on that. And I haven't been able to find that time. So what I've done instead is I've asked um, other people working in ceramics. In this instance, it's a ceramic artist called Greta Joachim, or Joachim as we like to say in Trinidad and Tobago. And I told her what I wanted. She asked me what sizes for the plates, and I wanted to create a cup that looked like a posy cup. I don't know an American equivalent to the word posy, but it basically is a large chamber pot. I think that's the word. Yes. And for carnival, people drink out of them while they're playing the devil, and it's very off-putting because the chamber pot, of course, is used as a bath, as a toilet. So I had to make these cups that look like posies or chamber pot, and the plates are all devils. And it's a collection that I want to continue. I want to do a molten body of pieces, so they're red, almost the black. And I want to try a couple other items for carnival collections because I think that carnival lends itself to so many opportunities, and I would like to see certain things made. And as happens, when I can't find things that I would like to see, I do it. I make them myself.
I love that.
This piece is a pleasant surprise. This is a smaller work, meaning under a foot. So it's something like, I think it was like 9 by 10 or 9 by 12 inches. And for a very long time, I had the idea of creating atmosphere. I was asked by a local curator who has a gallery space in Trinidad called, um, oh my gosh, his name is suddenly gone. Oh my goodness. A Space in a Space, the frame shop. And his name is Ashraf. And he was having a show on of carnival characters. and it was just kismet. One of those situations where I'm asked to do something and I have exactly the idea that I want to do right away. And so this is embroidery with um, a kind of floss material on top of it to give that whole atmosphere of the sailors walking through powder, which is something that happens for Juve, that's very precious. But I do not believe anyone has ever captured it in embroidery, at least not as atmospherically as I have done with this. I get a lot of reaction for this, but this is based on looking, seeing, deciding on something based on, I don't even remember what could have been a reference. Just observing things, knowing what will work, wanting to try it, and proceeding like that.
Wow. Okay.
This piece is a piece I'm extremely happy to have made. And just like the piece with the sailors, and just like everything else I do, this body of work, which I call Panty Man, and Panty Man is a derogatory statement meaning of man who is soft or a man who is effeminate. We could push it to a man who is gay if you want to go into negative stereotyping about people. And it's looking at the whole idea of things that women and people say to men all the time that goes through their mind. I chose a quilt because of its softness, of the fact that we all like to snuggle under one. But can one imagine what it must be like to want that comfort and want that safety? So it's symbolism. You want that comfort, you want that safety, but within that safety is a constant barrage of criticism. So I turn the whole concept over on its ear from the standpoint of we say things to men and we do not realize that we are hurting them just as much. We talk about male toxicity, but where does it come from? We all have to check ourselves, particularly women who raise boys to be men. So the images you're seeing there, the lettering, so I have lettering like macho, things people say, macho, moody, um, things that men are told they need to be all the time. I've made it into a thread that can raise and you can read it. But the thing about the piece is that you have to read it from several angles. So if two people are looking at the piece, they have to pass each other, they have to turn their face from one place to the other. It's very interactive and it's a work that really satisfied me tremendously. I was really um, happy to be able to have done it. It's of course quilt size, which runs into several feet, and I was really satisfied with the outcome.
Yeah. It's great.
Now this, being in Trinidad and Tobago, I have to tell you that I've been looking at the American political situation ever since childhood. So, as a foreigner, but someone with access to looking at American television, I have always been very interested in your politics. Oddly enough, with the campaign between Trump and Hillary Clinton, I was very blasé. I was so sure she was going to win the election that I strangely did not look at a lot of the debates at the time.
Yeah.
And of course, when she lost the election, I was one of those people just standing there with stunned silence, right? So, of course, with Trump arguing and insisting that he did not lose the election to Joseph Biden, and what would proceed to happen at the White House. Again, I am a foreigner and on my own home ground watching people enter the White House, and I'm just shocked out of my mind watching this whole thing unfold. And the officer who kind of saved the day, who told people to go in the other direction, it cannot be lost on me the fact that he's a black officer. It cannot be lost on me the George Floyd situation. I think this gentleman deserved a moment, and so I embroidered him. Um, I felt certain that it would be important to record it. And actually, this embroidery is the start of a collection of work I want to do on that whole situation. And I do want to look at uh, politics in America because, as you know, I look at tough subject matter, and it's interesting to me to look at the things that we say and do and
Mhm.
justify against what is reality.
Okay.
This is another performance work of mine. It's called Blood Mass. And every carnival, more or less, I play a character, as I mentioned before, but this one is particularly special to me because prior to performing this, there was a murder in Trinidad of a young woman that really caught the attention of the island. And when I was deciding what I would play, what character I would play, and I need to precede this by saying that the baby doll carnival is very popular right now. There are a lot of women taking on the character from the standpoint of domestic violence or interpreting her in several ways. But again, the tendency is for it to prettify it. The women look very beautiful. The children that they're holding, whether they're plentiful or one child, everybody is looking lovely. That's not my interest. When I chose to play this role, the death of this woman came to me very strongly. It basically woke me up in my sleep and basically said to me, you have to play this character. And so I
Mhm.
coined the term blood mass because um, I was looking at the idea of how we use carnival, juve, to do mud. We put mud on our bodies, we put paint on our bodies, etc. But the whole idea of women in this situation where they're in relationships, they're in trusting environments, and then they're murdered. I felt, let me replace the mud with blood. Very unexpected choice. I understand the gravity of a choice like that. But for me, I felt playing this character alive with the blood on her body, masked, taking back her life, was important. It's easy to see, okay, I'm playing a character that has been murdered, but by having her drenched in that blood, kind of like what we see in that famous 70s film Carrie, where she's being made fun of and somebody
Mhm.
drenched her with blood because there was an issue with her menstruation and all of that. I'm looking at it that way as well. I'm looking at, okay, yes, you can kill the body, but you cannot kill the spirit. And with this work, I put a sort of a command out to the nation that women should play this character. That although on first blush it would look or may look as though she has been wounded, she's rising out of that. So it's of all the characters I've played so far, um, it's been the most moving to me, and I'm excited to see what I do next year. This piece is an experimental work that I did, I think, in 2003. It's felt. and netting, and it's looking at firearms because in Trinidad and Tobago, we are situated between South America and America, Florida, and we are at basically a, that vulnerable point of entry for drugs and guns. And I did a body of work back then looking at these elements. And as you mentioned, I look at using soft materials to discuss hard topics. And I wanted to see how I could take net and give it that heavy look, um, that weight of a gun. And it turned out way better than I could have expected. I really was very satisfied with the layering and the opportunity to create a silhouette that was done here. There's a little bullet on the side which you can't really see, but the image is basically of a gun and a bullet. I look at that a lot in my work.
Mhm.
This is my first attempt at the sailor in powder. And again, it's that looking at a subject where I wanted to use soft material to discuss something that is atmospheric, to discuss something that has movement, to achieve a sense of place and atmosphere. So, this is one of my experimental pieces. I felt that for this talk today, it would be good to not just talk about my work that's finished, but also to talk about the process because I find that the working process is just as valuable as the final work. In many instances, I find that the sketches and the attempts and the experiments are hugely relevant and in some instances even more important than the final works.
Okay.
This this is a lot of fun to me, this piece, and I hope to make some much larger ones. My intention is to do a whole series of tea towels which look at colonialism, and I did it because of the fact that in my island in particular, and all the islands in the Caribbean, of course, tourism is a large part for many islands, not necessarily for Trinidad and Tobago. Tobago, more so than Trinidad, I would say, is interested in tourism because of its size. But generally, tourism is important in the islands, and in so being important, you find that the the interest in focusing on the colonial past, romanticizing it, wanting to bring back a sense of things were simpler, everything was working better, etc. So I found a series of images from that colonial past. These are two Indian women. It's a very classic photo. You could find it very easily online. And I wanted to do the embroidery in a technique that I learned in primary school. That early, basically stitch by line. Um, they were done for tea towels and napkins and whatnot, and they would normally be pictures of kittens wearing clothes. It sounds ridiculous, but the kittens wearing clothes and on a sitting on a rocking chair. So I mimicked the technique for these colonial images because they're all around the same period. But I chose to bring them up to the present with the emojis because of what the emojis stand for and the fact that we've gotten into this culture now of basically racing through imagery, ticking what we like with an emoji, a smiley face, um, a wave, a hand, a heart, So I wanted to look at that fact that here we are looking, knowing our history, knowing where we came from, but wanting to pretend or wanting to for want of a better word, whitewash the whole thing and add these emojis like everything was great when we know better. So it's a body of work I want to revisit again in the future because I really liked the idea. I looked at all the domestic women and the men in the cane field, the children running around with no shoes on their feet near a well, imagery like that we want to pretend was so lovely when we know very well that everyone was struggling just as people struggle today. It hasn't changed.
Yeah, that's so true.
I did a body of work in 2012. I think it was 2012 where I was so disheartened by having to deal with lawyers. I was going through a divorce and a custody situation with my child. And um, it put me in a unique position regarding looking at the police system, the victims. And so what happened was I did a large body of linen embroidery where I looked at four strata. I looked at victims, which I did all in white embroidery on white. This image here is looking at the perpetrators or the thieves, as it were. They're all in brown because they are of the earth. I did a series on the judiciary that I did in yellow because I felt that, at least in my island, you have many people who are in remand who have been just, their lives have just been wasted away waiting on a case to be called. And you have lawyers who come up on television and make all kind of comments about what they're doing as lawyers, but we know very well that crime has not been able to be corralled in any way. It seems as though it's running away at the seams. And then you have, so it was called Police and Thief. So you had the police, the judiciary, the victims, and the criminals, four different sets of colors. And then eventually I began to look at mixing the two. So the instance of the police on the take, the sincere criminal and whatnot. So this is a body of work that I want to again continue to explore further. But it was my first foray into a large body of work where the message I wanted to tell was so multi-layered to that extent. And actually, before COVID, I was on a residency in New York, and I met an artist who is a Sami artist, and their indigenous work takes them to using embroidery as well. And the artist I met was doing some long pieces. And I'm presently researching the idea of taking this concept and doing much thinner, longer pieces so that you can literally, like what happens with altarpieces and other types of work, you can basically tell a story from one side of the room to the other. So I'm looking into to working very long and very angular.
Mm, that's great.
I did this work in Scotland, and this was at CCA Glasgow. And at the time, I was very interested in typography, literally using wire and wadding and wrapping embroidery thread around the wire and the wadding and producing words. So this long piece is a list of I would call it the companion piece to Panty Man. This is all the different things women are called. So you might see the word trick here. If you turn sideways, you will see the word shiksa. So it's every language. So it's looking at words like there's even a Jamaican word there. I think it says puntang. All kinds of ridiculous things that women have to hear, you know, as they're walking down the street, as they're minding their own business, as they're having conversations with people. They sometimes even use the language themselves just to make a point, or because they think that it's normal. So this piece is all these different things women are called, and my intention for the work is to eventually have two people hold the work on either side, and for somebody to be able to jump rope with these words. These
Oh,
words, yes, the words just coming up and down and up and down and causing a shadow. Because just like with Panty Man, it's okay. Words don't hurt you, but they do because they're repetitive. You hear them even when you don't want to hear them. You can't not hear them. You can't unhear. So yeah, that's what this piece was about.
I love it.
So this piece was along the same lines as well. The largest word here is sketel. So and Jezebel. And this piece is called Hit, and it's a canopy. And what happened is it was put up in the gallery space with light intended to come through it. So you're looking up at the canopy of words, and you're making them out as you go along. But as you're looking up at them and perhaps not reading them aloud, you're reading them in your mind, the words are reflecting back. And I really like the idea of the whole words having power. So that's what this piece is all about.
Okay.
I think this is the last thing.
Well,
I did
there's
this.
more after this one.
Oh, okay. I did this piece along with about 25 to 30 other embroideries, all in red, white, and black. This was a sort of a love letter and questionnaire to my country. I did it at the National Museum. It's a body of work called Black God, and I was looking at our police system. I was looking at the fact that we want safety in our nation, and many times people tell stories of the police not helping, not assisting, not coming on time to a scene of a crime, not feeling safe with the police, not trusting them. And so I wanted to look, and I did look at the whole idea of the police service being a body, a power that's supposed to protect its citizens, wearing putting on this uniform every day, conscious of the fact that that is the only mandate. So the whole body of work was red, white, and black, our national colors. All the pieces were done on red. The National Museum allowed me to have the room painted red. Um, I looked at every possible aspect of service regarding policemen and women. So I looked at both both people working for us. I looked at um, their dress uniform, which this is what this piece is about. I did a bunch of small works where I looked at the fact that here they are and they are marching in order because they're supposed to be disciplined, and yet there is so much discipline lacking many times. And I looked at the prison system. So it was a large number of red, white, and black pieces. And I wanted to have it in the National Museum so that the public could see it and a dialogue could be started. So my hope for this body of work is that eventually our museum in Trinidad that houses all of the history of our police system will eventually one day actually show it in its entirety, and maybe a different kind of conversation can be had from Blackguard.
Yeah. And here's your last image, which is at one worry right now.
That's right. That's right. Oh gosh. Um, Looking at it again, it feels a little. It feels precious. This is one of the first pieces that really caught my eye. For Popo, the name came much later after starting this work. Um, because I was looking at children, and in Trinidad and in the Caribbean, that's something very common. People call little kids Popo, particularly babies, and that whole innocence. And this is of this little boy who is brought by his mother to see something that he really shouldn't at all. Neither of them should have to stand there looking at a scene where somebody has been shot.
Yeah.
And to have the guard there with his large gun. I remember when I went to school in New York, I went to Pratt, and when I came back home in the late 90s, I think, I left Trinidad where seeing an officer with an exposed firearm was not seen. And I came back to Trinidad where it was commonplace. It was very off putting. And eventually I was made to understand that a firearm to an officer is like wearing, how to put it, it's something that they cannot walk without. They have to be on guard all the time with their firearm. Really, really scary to observe. So in doing Popo, I wanted to look at that. So I'm so appreciative of the fact that this body of work is seen in Seattle because you have that divide, that strange divide between protection and service, as I said before, and how young people will grow up with this. I left Trinidad without being consciously aware of the unrest to that degree that we had to arm ourselves, we had to arm officers with firearms that looked like gigantic objects of fire. Um, and it's looking at things that we take totally for granted, but send huge messages. On the one hand, protecting, yes, but in the wrong hands, in the wrong moment, it could all go left so very easily.
Yeah. I see. So
So that's a large part of what my work is about.
yeah.
Yeah.
We had a couple questions of things that came up during that really incredible talk. So thank you.
Oh,
Um, you know, so one thing in particular that I was thinking about is just how much your work is influenced by Carnival. And I've been talking to other artists who are Trinidadian or Caribbean, and they've talked about just like the fact that everybody works together, right, and creates their own costumes. And that kind of gives them the power to feel like, one, anything can be a material, but also
mhm.
two, everybody can be artists. And I wanted to kind of ask you, does some of that resonate for you too, as a lot of your work, right, is influenced by the culture.
Mhm. I did my first performance because of a visit to a traditional mass program that was on a carnival weekend, where in looking at all the costumes, I felt like I was not being spoken to. I felt as though it was a tourist event. I felt it hadn't advanced. And when I get into a mood where I look at things and I find I see no progress and I criticize it, I ask the obvious next question: what are you doing about it?
Yeah,
And from that, I decided I'm going to play a character. Let me join it and see if what I could bring to it. And it stuck. I've been doing it ever since. And I will say this about our carnival. What I really love about it is that it is so organic. Anyone can join it. You don't have to be um, part of anything. You don't have to um, have any kind of special ability. It is open to all. And that is its advantage. We say all the time that it is a dying art. No, it's a constantly replenishing art form
yeah,
because it will always grow. So I love that. So I joined it because of a vexation, and I have stayed in it because of its pliability.
I love it. So your embroidered pieces, like everybody's just been wowed by it. Obviously, it's incredible. These are single needle embroidery pieces. Can you talk a little bit about how long it takes? Um,
It's
and
interesting. It's interesting to ask because these are some of my needles right now, right? And I have some favorites. Like right now, for the work I'm doing, these very long ones. Let me see if I could. These
yeah,
very long ones are working really well. But then I have some that are a third of the height. They're really, really tiny. They're so tiny that they sometimes, if you're working for very long, they suddenly feel like they've disappeared in your finger. um, that I love as well. So I'm always on the lookout for good needles. And I have someone recently telling me they find I work too slow, they don't find I do enough work. And okay, but if you can't rush embroidery, I could choose anything. Huh? I don't have to work in embroidery. I choose to because I just absolutely am totally seduced by the idea of seeing this thing happen. When I start an embroidery, a lot of the time, oddly enough, I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And then I start.
yeah.
And by the time I'm, yeah, and by the time I'm like on my seventh stitch, I'm like, I want to see where this goes. So there's always that enthusiasm. If I didn't have it, I wouldn't. I wouldn't work in embroidery.
Well, and I kind of understand. Like, I've been working in mosaic, so people will be like, "How do you have the patience?" And I'm like, I look at your work, I'm like, "How do I have the patience?" But I'm like, I guess I just do the same thing in a different material. But you get into your zone, and it's actually very therapeutic.
Mhm.
Your mind goes into a different place. Um, what are you working on next? Where can people find your work next?
I have a show in a few days actually, where
Oh,
where the curator I mentioned before,
yeah.
every year he looks at a different calypsonian, and this year he's looking at my favorite calypsonian of all time, the Mighty Shadow, Winston Bailey. So I'm doing three embroideries for this show, and I'm looking at Winston Bailey's look at um, oh God, what a storyteller he was. I'm looking at some of his famous songs and interpreting them. So I'm doing that, and I also have two pieces of work that I want to include in a symposium where the conversation is on women. So I have two saucy looking girls in a technique that it's embroidery, but I want to make it soft sculpture. So I want to make them like pillows. It's something that
Oh,
I've mentioned to other curators, and they just shy away from. So sometimes working in a place like Trinidad and Tobago is hugely challenging because I know if I showed that somewhere else, that's not coming into question at all. But I respect and understand why. It's a small place, the marketplace isn't huge. Um, you have to consider what people use their work for. A lot of the time, people are very conservative. So um, I'm getting an opportunity to show that in a context where it's exactly the way I want to show it. So I'm excited about that.
yeah. I'm so excited about all your work. You still have a few more hours today to see Adele's work at Wanawari. We're up until 5. And you can obviously keep watching this video. We are so grateful to have you and have you in Seattle virtually and your work blessing us.
Oh,
If you don't already, please go to wannaworry.org and follow us and join our newsletter to learn about all the cool things we do.